I'm sure you've seen the media reports about entire companies getting shut down by ransomware attacks. It is preventable. It does not have to happen to you. And this video is going to give some basics that you can do to keep your company from being the next victim. Now, this is not a video about how to make your network absolutely bulletproof, but it is about at least keeping your butt from flapping in the wind with rookie mistakes that make you super vulnerable to attacks. So keep watching and we'll do a shallow walk in the kiddie pool of IT security basics every company on earth should be doing anyway. So a little bit about me, who am I, and why am I qualified to speak on this topic? Well, I've worked in IT for about 20 years in a corporate setting. I've done desk side support, I've done system administration, working with servers on the back end, and in the last 5 years, I've also been working in IT security. Now, as far as my industry certifications, I have a lot of the ones from CompTIA, but I also recently got my ISC squared CISSP. So part of the reason I'm doing this video is the selfish motive of being able to keep up my CPEs, but I also enjoy talking about this stuff too. So as an IT security professional, it's headlines like this that absolutely drive me nuts. Now, I have no idea what actually happened in the case of these particular companies we're talking about. I don't work for them. I don't have any inside knowledge of what took place. So companies, please do not sue me. But now that having been said, I mean, these are some very consequential things. We have a utility in Colorado that got attacked. We have a city in Florida that their stuff got shut down until they were able to pay the hackers the ransom. Now, this third one hit especially close to home for me because that's the hospital system where I grew up. I was actually born in one of their hospitals. Based on my experiences, based upon the experiences of a lot of people I know and grew up with, I'm not surprised that this happened. I'll leave it at that. But here we have a hospital system where for 3 weeks straight, all of their technology was shut down. Everything, all the computers, all the servers, everything, because they got hit by an attack. So this is some very consequential stuff that's happening. And of course, you would think that these would be the very companies that would be doing the basics sufficiently that they would not be attacked in this way. But apparently not. Once again, I have no idea what happened in their case, how they failed, but I'm pretty sure somebody dropped the ball. So just to emphasize the point, once again, why does this drive me nuts? Because if you're doing even the minimal, mediocre, sort of best effort, mostly okay IT practices, this almost never happens. So let's put some parameters around the word almost. Can you do everything absolutely right and still get ransomware? Yes. But now what this video will do is give you some simple, basic, easy, amateur things that you can do that will greatly reduce your odds of getting catastrophically shut down by ransomware. So do you need to do more than this? Yes, a lot more. The information in this video will only pull you back from the brink of imminent destruction. If your security is bad enough that you're not already doing the things in this video that I'm going to describe, then you still have a lot of work to do. It's kind of like the concept of surgeons washing their hands before they go into surgery. That wasn't a standard practice 100 years ago, but then scientists found that surgeons could greatly reduce the patient mortality rate by doing the simple act of washing their hands because of this newfangled stuff they discovered called bacteria. Now, did they need to do a lot more than that? Absolutely. And if you walk into any hospital, you'll see all the steps that they've taken over the last 100 years to make everything absolutely pristinely clean. But now washing their hands before surgery was a great start and did a lot to reduce the patient mortality rate after surgery. And so following some basic IT security best practices will do a lot to reduce your chances of getting ransomware and keeping the effects at a minimum. There's a company where I used to work. Once again, I'm not going to give you a lot of detail about that because I was an insider and there's information that I'm not allowed to give you. I'm not going to tell you who they were even. But here's what I can tell you. They had some fairly mediocre security practices in place. They had client antivirus that had regular updates. They did not grant users local admin rights on their PCs. They did have some Windows security patching in place. They had file shares with somewhat granular permissions. They took backups of the servers and then they stored those backups off-site. And they also had some email filtering in place. Now, one day, one of our file shares at one branch office did get encrypted by ransomware, but we restored it from backup and it was up again in 2 hours. We left at 5 o'clock that day. It didn't turn into a multi-day disaster where we had to call the FBI and everything was shut down. No, we got hit, but we recovered very quickly. So what the heck? For an entire company to get completely shut down by a ransomware attack, that means that someone wasn't even doing the minimal, mediocre, best effort at IT security. Somebody dropped the ball and they dropped it hard. You do not have to be an IT super know-it-all expert to prevent a catastrophic ransomware attack. You just have to be reasonably competent and at least sort of care about your job. Now, you might be thinking right now, well, that sounds pretty harsh and condescending. But the things we're going to talk about here are pretty basic things that really any company should have been doing anyway. If you're an IT department, these are things that as a department you should be doing. If you are the lone IT professional for a company, these are things that you should already be qualified to do if you're going to be in that position. So what should you do? Well, if you do the following minimal, mediocre effort, phoning it in IT security practices, you'll be much less likely to get hit with a catastrophic ransomware attack. So first of all, install antivirus on everything. I don't care if it slows the computer down a little bit, and I really don't care if some idiot vendor says, well, you can't install antivirus with my product. Yeah, you can. You just have to figure out what the exclusions are that you need to put into that antivirus so that it doesn't interfere with their product. And really, if they're a good vendor, that's something they should know anyway, because in this world, at this day, at this time, you can't run a computer without antivirus. And if your product is not designed to run with antivirus, then you're just not with the times. You're not working in the current world that we live in. So yes, every product has to work with antivirus. It's just a matter of figuring out what exclusions to put with it. And yes, it has to be installed on every computer that touches the network. Any machine without antivirus on it could be that patient zero that gets infected and then spreads it to the rest of the network. And that's what you really, really don't want. Now, it's important to remember that not all antivirus is the same. That cheap free antivirus that comes built into Windows, that's better than nothing, I guess, barely. But it's kind of like that $12 an hour security guard at the mall with pepper spray and a radio. Better than nothing, yeah, I guess, but would you get better results with a better investment? Yeah, probably. You tend to get what you pay for, though expensive solutions don't always yield better protection. So focus on what protection features that the product offers and how well it performed when it was reviewed by a neutral, I might say reputable third party like PC World, PC Magazine, respected periodicals like that. They have good reviews on what antivirus is out there and how well it performed. Of course, you really need more than just antivirus, though. The best solution is a premium combo product from a trusted vendor that has multiple security features, such as, of course, anti-malware, which includes a broad category of different types of viruses and spyware and worms and so forth. But it also needs a feature called intrusion detection and prevention, where it can detect suspicious activity from somebody trying to break in. Also, an enhanced network firewall. Windows has a firewall built into it, but some of the firewall software that comes from vendors tends to be a little smarter and do a little better job of filtering traffic. There's also what's called heuristic-based detection, where even though the definition doesn't say that something specifically is a virus, if it looks like a virus, walks like a virus, talks like a virus, then it's going to treat it like one. Some suites also have email client protection, like for Microsoft Outlook. And then, of course, there's web browser protection, where if you're running Chrome or Internet Explorer, it puts a plugin in there that will offer an extra layer of security so that if you go to a website that has a virus built into it, it's able to detect that and block it right up front. So see, these are some of the extra features that you can get with a more advanced suite with more protection features built into it. Of course, if you're going to put security software on all the computers on your network, then you have to know what computers are on your network. Can't put antivirus on them if you don't know they're there. And so there's several ways you can go about figuring out what those are. There's a free tool called Nmap that is a network scanning tool. It can tell you all the network nodes that it finds. There's also your DHCP server, which can tell you all the clients that it has handed out an IP address to and what the name of that client is. That can be a handy way. Also, depending on the size of your office, if you just walk around and look at what all is jacked into the wall or what all is sitting there, that'll give you an idea of what you're dealing with too. So if somebody has a computer over in the corner that they're doing something specific with, maybe you weren't aware of before, well, now you do know about it and you can do something about that. Also, does your company have policies about bringing in personal devices? Do you enforce those policies? So you can have somebody that they bring in their home computer and it doesn't have antivirus, or they haven't paid for the antivirus updates for several years. They haven't got Windows updates in several years. Their machine is full of viruses, and then they bring it in and jack it into the network. Well, obviously that's going to create a problem if those viruses and other malware in their machine gets loose on your network. So these are things you really need to be aware of, and you need to have good policies around that you enforce, as well as good education for your users on why that's something you really wouldn't want to do. That segues nicely into the next point, which is keep your antivirus updated. See, antivirus software without updates is basically the same as no antivirus at all. If it doesn't know what a virus looks like, then it can't detect it and it can't block it. So set your antivirus to auto-update its definitions. If you have a small network, it's fine for it to pull that directly from the internet. But now if you have a larger network, you might want to use a central management server that can push those updates out to the client machines. If you're running 50 or more PCs, that's probably a good idea, because you don't want all 50 machines or 100 machines or 1,000 machines to all be trying to pull down updates from the internet all at the same time. I've done that before, and it absolutely slows your internet connection to a crawl. Also, you want to keep track of any clients that are failing to update. If you have a small network, just periodically check them. If you have a large network, the management server should tell you that. And also install antivirus software version updates as well. Let's say that you're running version 5.0.1 of an antivirus software suite, and they find some major security hole in that suite that makes it subject to attacks from viruses. Well, then you'd want to install the patch that fixes that hole in the antivirus software itself. And of course, as time goes on, as there's new changes to Windows, new versions of antivirus software will be needed in order to keep up with those changes and remain functional with the OS. The next topic can be actually pretty touchy from a political standpoint, but it is something where you need to stand your ground and do it. Restrict regular user account access. Inevitably, you're going to have somebody that's like, hey, buddy, can I have admin access to my PC? I don't want to bother you every time I want to install software on it. Or worse yet, I've seen this as well. Hey, buddy, can you make me a domain admin so I can just install stuff anywhere I want? It's just too restrictive the way it is right now. No, you cannot. Absolutely not. Why, you may ask? Well, it's not because we're trying to be mean or because we're trying to unduly restrict people from doing stuff on their computers, from getting work done. It's not because we got picked on in high school and now this is our way of showing everybody how powerful we are. No, it's because of the very practical reason that whatever access a user has is the same access that a virus would have when that user's computer gets compromised. So if the user has free reign to do whatever they want on their PC, so does a virus. If the user has free reign to do whatever they want on the whole network, so does a virus. And yes, that includes the IT people too. Now, before you panic, before you say, wait a minute, no, that's not possible. I have to have admin access to do my job. You can't do that to me. Calm down. It's cool. What you need is a separate admin account that is only used for administrative stuff, like managing servers, installing software, maybe changing users' passwords in Active Directory, things like that. You can check your email, you can type up Word documents, browse the internet and stuff with your regular restricted account that has no more access than any other user would have, and then use your admin account for admin stuff. That way, even if the IT person gets infected with the virus does not automatically get God-level access to everything on the network. It's just as restricted as any other user account would be. So along that same vein of thought of restricting user access, the third thing we want to do is lock down our file shares. Sure, the easiest thing to do is to have a giant file share that has everything and then give everyone full control permissions to it, where anybody can look at anything they want. There's zero management overhead. You can just go out on there, find what you need, and there you got it. We can label this the giant hippie commune security model because it has no restrictions, no privacy, and everything belongs to everyone. Not comfortable with that? Well, good, you shouldn't be. Most people aren't. Usually the only reason it's configured that way is because someone didn't know what they were doing. They didn't understand the implications of checking those boxes that say everyone full control when they set it up, and it worked, so they didn't ask any questions. It could be that they were too lazy or too overworked to do it right. You got one guy who's running the network and he's in 5 different places at once, and you ask him for a file share, and this is what you got. And it's also possible that no one realized it was configured that badly. Maybe the last person was here, they did a bad job, they got fired, somebody else took over, and now here they've inherited this network with all these bad practices, and they just haven't got around to fixing it yet. So here is the right way to do it. Something we've touched on a little bit already is what's known as the principle of least privilege. The only access you get is what you need to do your job. Unless you need access to something to do your job, you don't get access to it, period. So the accounting people would only get access to the accounting folder on the share. Marketing people would only get access to the marketing folder, sales people to the sales folder. The IT people would get access to the IT folder with their regular account, but then their admin account might have broader access to allow them to manage those other shares. And so you get the idea. People have only what they need to do their job. Once again, why would we do this? Well, amongst other obvious reasons, like you don't want everybody being able to look at the accounting folder and knowing how much money everybody makes, or the fact the company is in the red and is about to shut down next month, stuff like that. It's also so that when a hacker or a virus steals your credentials, this will limit what they have access to as well. It's like a fire zone within a building that contains a fire to a limited area instead of a whole building burning to the ground. Yeah, some damage is done, but it's not as bad as it could have been. On the other hand, if an account has unlimited access to the network to do whatever it wants, it can be used to do unlimited damage to the network. These are the kinds of scenarios where a virus infection ends up taking down an entire network for weeks at a time. It ran in the context of an account that was able to just destroy everything because it had that level of access. That's not what you want to have happen. So, how do you limit user access to file shares? Well, using two things. First of all, folder permissions. This is a folder level list of users or groups that are allowed to access the folder and what they're allowed to do on it. One group may have read-only access where they can just look. Another group may have modify access where they can look, touch, delete. They have a little bit more control. And of course, there's full control where they can look, touch, delete, add. They can also control who else has access to it. That's why we limit full control access to those that we want to have administrative access to the folder and nobody else. Can you assign individual user accounts permissions on a folder? You can, but now if you have a larger number of users, like 25 or more, that gets really difficult to manage really quickly, especially if you have a lot of folders too. So a security group is a great thing to use because it's a list of accounts that logically have something in common that would allow you to assign or deny certain privileges based on who that group is. So for example, all the users who work for HR would go into a common security group that grants them access to something like the HR folder or maybe the HR software or something else that you only want HR to have access to. It's access logically based on who they are and what they do. So in the next slide or two, I'm going to give you a demo of what this would look like if you're using Microsoft Active Directory and a share based on a Windows Server environment. Maybe you're not using this. Of course, if you're not using this, it means that you are technically skilled enough that you were brave enough to go to some other solution besides Microsoft. So fine, but this is what probably 99% of the environments out there that have 50 or more users is going to be using. So first of all, you would create the Active Directory groups that correspond to your shared folders. So for example, if you have an accounting folder, you would name it something logical to let you know, yeah, this group is for the accounting folder. Sales folder, you would call it sales folder, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Next, you would add all the users to this group that you want to have access to the object that you are assigning permissions to. So if it's all the people you want to have access to the accounting folder, that would probably be the accounting staff, maybe a few other executives or managers that would also need access to this. But this is the step where you figure out who that list of people is and you add them to the group. And the next step is you assign that group permissions to the folder. So in the folder properties, you go to the security tab and you hit edit on the permissions. You add the group to it that you just created, and then you grant it modify permissions. Now, once again, you do not check full control. Only admins need full control of a folder because the admins are the ones that control who else can have permissions to this folder. You don't want to grant that to just anybody. You OK your way out and then you're done. Now you can also grant groups read-only permissions. Maybe you only want the executives in accounting to have modify and you want everybody else to have read-only or something like that. This is where you have very granular control over what people can do in it. Now, the other important thing here is when you look at the access control list, if you see that everyone has some sort of permission, do you really want everyone to be able to do anything on this, or do you want only accounting people to be able to see it? If you only want accounting people to be able to see it, you would click on everyone and then remove that. Now, if you really want to take it to the Jedi Master level and just impress everybody with how super secure you are, there's a feature called Access-Based Enumeration in Windows Server that will only show users folders that they have permission to access. If they don't have permission to access it, it doesn't even show it to them. Now, that's handy from a practical standpoint because if you don't have access to it, then why see it? It's just something in the way that keeps you from being able to get to the stuff you need. But also a hacker or a virus wouldn't know that the folder is there either if the server doesn't even show it to them. So it's an extra layer of protection and it's a practical help in being able to find the stuff that you need as well. The next thing I'm going to talk about is one of the most important things you can do from a security standpoint, period. Not just to prevent ransomware, but to keep a lot of bad stuff from happening. Install your updates. Let me repeat that. Install your updates. Every piece of software ever written has imperfections. Why? Because it was written by a human, and they're very complex. And the way that you make different software modules talk to each other and work with each other, it's very complicated and it's fraught with different flaws that will make it insecure, make it subject to hacking and cracking and attacking. So these are the security holes that then allow malware, such as ransomware, to get a foothold in a computer to begin with. And very often, the reason that a company has a major catastrophic infection with a virus is because, yeah, there was an update available for a known flaw, but then they never installed the update. Remember a couple of years ago hearing about WannaCry spreading like wildfire within companies? At Company X, where we had the fairly mediocre security, we didn't get hit by that. You know why? Because Microsoft released the patch, we installed the patch, and then it was like a month later that everything blew up and we were already patched. So once again, we had lots of days that we were going home at 5 o'clock that everybody else in the world was like staying overnight and panicking and trying to fix stuff. See, install your updates, and that will keep you from having a lot of grief. And of course, you need to install more than just operating system updates. There's a lot of other software that runs on the computer as well that you have to keep updated. First and foremost, make sure your web browser is updated because that is what is actually going out and touching the pages on the internet that may have viruses, that may have malicious scripts on them that will take advantage of security flaws in the web browser software. So that especially is something right there on the front lines that you want to keep updated as much as possible. And of course, there's things like Adobe Reader, Adobe Flash, a few other Adobe products that are maybe built into the web browser or that also view a lot of content from the internet. And so that's something you really want to keep patched and updated as well. The third one here, this is a dirty word among security people, Java. Now, Oracle, please don't sue me, but you know it's true. Java is horrible from a security standpoint. If you don't need Java on your computer, uninstall it. If you do have to have Java, please update it to the latest version if you can. Now, there's some programs, some very dumbly written programs that have to have a very highly specific version of Java that's like 5 years old. If you're stuck in that situation, please try and find a way to update to a newer version of that software where you can just use the latest version of Java. Or if you're lucky, the software just doesn't use Java anymore, period, because the developer said, hey, Java sucks. Let's not use this anymore. Once again, Oracle, please don't sue me, but you know it's true. Microsoft Office, that's also a big target for hackers because it's so big, it's so complex, and so many people use it. So you want to keep, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and especially Microsoft Outlook updated with the latest set of Microsoft security patches. And of course, your antivirus or security software also needs to be updated because it can also be vulnerable to attack if there are security holes in the executables that run that software itself. This has been a common thing in the past with viruses that the first step is they will detect what antivirus you have, and then they will actually attack the antivirus in order to avoid detection themselves. And so if you have an older version of the antivirus, please keep that updated to the newest version and continue to install security patches. But you might ask, what if the update breaks something? Well, not installing updates makes it exponentially more likely that malware will break something far worse than any update ever would have. It's kind of like those parents that don't vaccinate their kids because they heard that it causes autism. And now what do we have? Well, now we have a bunch of kids running around that aren't vaccinated, and we have outbreaks of mumps and measles in places where that didn't used to happen. Of course, a key difference between anti-vaxxers and people that don't install updates is that there is an element of truth that updates can cause problems. And so there's a couple of strategies you can employ to make sure that that doesn't happen to you, or at least lessen the chance that it will happen. It all comes down to testing your updates before you install them. Now, if you're a larger operation and you have the resources to do this, you can set up a test server and some test client PCs that mirror your production environment. You install the updates and you see what happens. Something breaks, you don't install that update until Microsoft or whoever the vendor is comes out with an updated update that doesn't break stuff. Now, alternatively, if you don't have the resources to do that level of testing, then what you can do is put a month or two delay between when vendors release an update and when you install it. That way, if there is some sort of catastrophic issue that it causes, then everybody else will find that out the hard way and you won't have to suffer through it. But you still get the update on there. So if 6 months from now they find an exploit for whatever issue that fixed, you're still safe. There are a lot of handy tools out there for update management. If you have a relatively small environment, less than 30 computers, maybe just a couple of servers, the strategy you can take is to set up client PCs to auto update from the internet, just like you do with your antivirus, and then manually update the servers. Maybe once a month, go out and install the updates that you want to install. Now, if you have a larger environment, that's really when you're going to use tools like Microsoft WSUS, Windows Server Update Service, or other tools from Microsoft or third-party vendors that allow you to push out updates to machines. If you're big enough that you need to worry about this, then you probably have the resources to do so. It's a good investment that will really pay off in the end. Let me be very clear though. Whatever you do, do not skip installing updates. Skip installing updates and you will live to regret it. Mark my words. You will be the next company that gets hit with a big virus that shuts you down for a week where you end up living there trying to clean up the mess. You'll have stories you'll tell about it for years and it will always be bad. Oh boy, remember back before we installed updates? Remember that one virus that hit us? Oh yeah, that was really bad. Yeah, glad we install updates now. Boy, that was a mess. Don't let that happen to you. You don't have to find out the hard way. Take my word for it. You want to install your updates. Now, this next section is going to deal with email and training your users on how to recognize an email attack. See, the most effective way that hackers have found to weasel their way into your network is by doing something called phishing, which has some overlap with another long-term email problem from back in the day, spam. Don't you just love all the neat little metaphors we use for things that don't necessarily make them easier to understand, they just obscure it even more? Here's an explanation of what I'm talking about with the terms phishing and spam. Phishing is when hackers send out a blast of emails to a bunch of people that contain a malicious link or an attachment that's infected with a virus, and if you take the bait and you click on it, then you get infected. Now, spam, that's a problem you're probably more familiar with. That's just junk email. That's those emails you get for special pills or maybe porn or who knows what else. But it's something you didn't ask for and it goes out to a lot of people. Now, these two concepts overlap when a hacker spams a bunch of people with a phishing email hoping somebody clicks on it. And only one person has to take the bait in order to make it worth their time, which is why it's really important that you educate all of your users about this. So, how do you defend against this? Well, first of all, you want to lessen the amount of spam coming in, which automatically lessens the amount of phishing emails that could get through as well. So, you want to use an email service that has good spam and malware filtering built right into it. And most cloud email services offer some form of this as part of their base package, but a lot of them offer enhanced protection as well for a little bit more money, and that could be worth your investment. Also, we already talked about this a little bit when we were talking about installing antivirus. You want to install security software that works with your web browser as well as your email client to identify malicious links and viruses, alert you to that, and filter it out. Of course, a basic principle of IT security is that your weakest link is always going to be the human sitting in front of the computer. So you really need to train your users to think before they click. Think about it this way. If one out of every 100 pieces of actual paper mail that came into your home had anthrax in it, how would you go about opening your mail? Would you just tear everything open immediately to see what it is, smell of it, lick the envelope? No way. You'd probably throw 90% of it away without even looking at it, unless you knew exactly who the sender was and why they were sending you this mail. And even then, you would be really, really careful, because what if somebody put a forged return address? You don't know. Treat email with the same level of caution for the same reason. So what does a phishing email look like? Well, first, it might appear to be from a legitimate source. Maybe it has company logos and other things in it that make it look legit. It looks official. It looks like something that really would come from your bank or from your manager. And usually it has a link in it or an attachment of some sort, and you're told, click this link or open this attachment right now because it's really, really important. That action by itself may be enough to get you infected with the virus. But now sometimes they also ask you to click the link and then log in with your username and password. The email might say, well, your account has been locked and you need to log in so that we can re-authenticate it, or some kind of horse manure like that. Which, when you do that, they then steal your credentials in order to hack you, rob you, or log into your network and encrypt your files. So if you're not sure if an email is legit, call the person who supposedly sent it, whether that's your bank or manager or somebody else in the company, and ask them, hey, what's this email all about? Or just ignore it. If it's really important, they'll try again, or they'll call you or something like that. Most cases with like government agencies, your bank, stuff like that, usually they're going to send you stuff in regular mail anyway. You're going to hear about it in some way besides an email. Two related topics are spearfishing and something very similar called whaling. Now, spearfishing is when they are after a specific person, a specific target. They're not going out there fishing for whatever fish takes the bait. They want you. And they're going to tune their tactics accordingly. They're going to find out things about you that they can then use to attack you that makes it more likely that you're going to click on that link or open that attachment. Now, whaling is spearfishing, except it's a target that is very big and very important, like the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, the senator from the great state of wherever, the general, the president, somebody that would have access to very highly sensitive, highly valuable information. So if we're the person charged with trying to educate these users on phishing, we really need to help them understand that because they are important, they are a target. And so they need to use even more caution than anybody else. See, sometimes the tendency, if you're a bigwig, is you throw around your weight and say, I don't want to do all the security stuff and I'm not going to, and you can't make me. That's completely the wrong attitude to have if you are important, because you have a lot more responsibility on your shoulders to protect the company and protect the people that work for you. So if you ignore absolutely everything else I have said, this is the one slide you should not ignore. This is probably the most important slide of this entire presentation, because this is the one thing that will absolutely save your butt if you ever get hit by ransomware. Companies that got hit by ransomware and were down for 2 and 3 weeks at a time and then ultimately had to pay the ransom anyway, this is where they went wrong. Take backups of your servers and your data and then protect those backups. See, if ransomware kills your data and you don't have a way of getting it back, well, then the situation's a lot like that quote from The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon said, I believe the appropriate metaphor here involves a river of excrement and a Native American water vessel without any means of propulsion. You are up crap creek. See, that's kind of how ransomware works. The basic idea is that the only copy of your precious critical data is now encrypted. And the only way you're going to get back is by paying somebody 20,000, 30,000, 10,000, 526, whatever amount of money they negotiate with you. But you have to pay that to some random person on the internet in untraceable bitcoins. And this is probably a pretty bad person that you really wouldn't want to give that kind of money to, because they're going to use it to do bad stuff. Terrorism, drug lords, organized crime, you name it. That is who is doing this kind of stuff, and that's who you are effectively funding if you have to pay them the ransom. But if you have a backup copy of your data and the backup copy didn't get encrypted too, then you can just restore your data from backup, and that's the end of the story. Some terrorist or some organized crime syndicate didn't get your $20,000 or $50,000, and you get to go home at 5 o'clock that day. Everybody wins except the terrorist. So how do you protect your backups? Well, you want to store them somewhere that a virus cannot directly access on the network. Cloud-based backups are good because you put them out on the internet, which is not right there on your network. There's a lot of really good cloud backup services available now for pretty reasonable prices. Also, offline backups to media such as a tape drive is kind of an old school, but still an effective way of backing up your data. And then it wouldn't be directly touched by a virus because the tape is sitting there in your desk or in the vault and it's not online to be touched. Also, backups to a protected network segment that you have divided off in its own VLAN, or a backup appliance system that has layers of protection on it. It's not joined to your domain. Those are good ways of protecting your backups as well. Really, though, storing your backups off-site is just a smart idea anyway. What if your building burns to the ground? Well, that way you still have a backup copy of your data when you rebuild your company. You know, on 9/11, there were entire companies that went out of existence that day because all their systems went out, as well as all of their backup data as well. It was all stored in the same building. So when the towers went down, everything went with it. But then there are companies that were based in the Twin Towers that survived because their backups were offsite. They could rebuild elsewhere, put all their data back, they were back in business. So the idea is you really want to have a backup that's offsite, that is protected in the event that any kind of catastrophic situation, including ransomware, happens. An additional step you can take in particular for backups that you keep on site is you can encrypt your backups. Most backup solutions offer the ability to encrypt a backup with a password, and usually this will keep ransomware from being able to access it and then encrypt it. So this, combined with the strategies on the previous slide, will help keep ransomware from killing your backups as well. So to recap, here are the things you should be doing to keep ransomware from catastrophically shutting you down, but also to prevent a lot of other bad stuff from being able to take your company down besides ransomware. These are just the basics. First of all, install antivirus on everything that touches your network, no exceptions, because any computer could be the one that infects everything else. Restrict user account privileges to the minimum needed for that person to do their job. IT people should use a separate admin account for their admin work, but their regular account is an account with no more access than anybody else. And that way the damage is contained if one of these accounts gets hacked. You lock down access to permissions on your file shares. Only grant users access to the parts of the file share that they need. That way, if that user gets a ransomware virus and it gets loose on the file share, it can only encrypt what they have access to. And then, of course, you can restore that from backup, hopefully. You install OS and software updates. Test them, wait a couple of months if you have to, install them very carefully, but don't not install them. You will regret it if you don't. Protect yourself from email attacks like spam, like phishing, as well as whaling and all the other terms that we talked about. Basically, think before you click. If it's a link, if it's an attachment, if you're not sure who it's from, don't click on it. And finally, this is the most important step of the whole thing if you want to avoid getting catastrophically shut down for weeks at a time and being that business in the news that can't operate until you pay the ransom. Take backups of your data and then protect the backups by storing them offline, store them in the cloud, and encrypt them too. So you do all of this and you won't be the next company that gets catastrophically shut down by ransomware. And for that matter, your operations are going to run a lot better anyway. This is not an exhaustive list of everything you need to be doing, but this will at least get you to some sort of baseline of mediocrity. So, like I said, these are the basics. If your company is not already doing these things, why? Big part of that is that IT is such a big, complicated topic that it's hard to know what you don't know until it's too late and you find out the hard way. Oh, that's something I wasn't doing right. So, in your organization, who is responsible for IT? What specific experience and qualifications do they have? Do they have industry certifications of any sort? And have you given them the proper support and resources that they need to properly run the department? If you want to guarantee the failure of your business in this day and time, in 2019 or whatever year you're watching this video, defund the IT department. Ignore their request for security tools. It's not 2005 anymore. You can't get away with defunding the IT department. That's not going to work anymore. In my experience, if your IT security is not where it should be, there's three key reasons that that may be the case. First of all, you have inexperienced or poorly trained IT staff. You may have old school IT managers who don't understand modern IT security, or you have lowest bidder IT contractors that really make a business model out of giving poor service and getting away with it. And it could be some combination thereof. So, on that first point, the reason that you may have IT staff that's not very well qualified is because you can't afford to hire top notch IT talent. But what you can do, though, is kind of take the approach of a college coach. You hire people who have great raw talent and then you train them. You find people who are logically minded, curious. They like figuring out how things work. They're tenacious, they don't give up easily, and they're highly motivated. And then you attach to their employment the condition that they will study for and take IT certification exams on a regular basis. Now, some people don't like certifications. They say that they're a waste of time, etc. I found them personally to be very educational. Like the A plus exam was great for getting that basic framework of how computers work, and that really launched me into a lot of different areas where I was able to continue my studies and really grow in my knowledge. So maybe what you can say is, well, within 6 months of employment, I would like you to have your CompTIA A plus certification. Here's a book. Good luck. And of course, you're going to hire somebody that you think has the technical ability that they could do that. And then, of course, like a good sports coach, you know that you're constantly going to be losing talent, maybe to other teams. So you make sure that you have a good recruiting system in place where you get people in, you train them, you give them that talent, and then you have the ability to replace them if you need to. And you create a good culture where you make your company a happy place to come work. And then people won't be looking for the exits as soon as they find a better job elsewhere. They'll have some kind of loyalty to you if you have some sort of loyalty to them, and that will pay off. Now, in this next area, this is a scenario I've seen play out many times over, and it's unfortunate. See, IT experience does not necessarily equal being good at IT. Let's say that your IT manager, they've been working in IT since the 80s and they have all these war stories about that Unix mainframe that they used to manage back in the day or how they used to program in COBOL and et cetera, et cetera. They've been around IT since IT has existed. But now, are they necessarily the most qualified person to be managing your IT infrastructure right now? See, the problem is that IT has changed a tremendous amount in the last 30 years. It continues to change. It's an arms race. If you don't keep up your knowledge, especially of IT security, in a year or two, you are completely behind, completely lost. And so sometimes you'll also have somebody who is deeply entrenched in the old practices from 20 years ago that they learned when they first got into IT, and they're not aware of or do not respect current IT security standards. There may be somebody, well, the way we used to do it back in the day was like this, and they may not really fully understand why we don't do it that way anymore, why that is the old school way. So that person may not be the best choice to lead your IT organization. Yet I've seen it many times over. The guy that is in the corner office is the guy that, started as a desktop support tech in 1985, and just because they've been there a long time, they've worked their way up the ladder. Do they know anything about IT? Not necessarily. The questions you have to ask about that person is, have they kept their IT knowledge current? Now, if they've worked in IT for 30 years and they started as a COBOL programmer, but now, they know Windows 2016 top to bottom, or at least they understand enough about IT right now that they will respect the people under them when they tell them things, that are not so arrogant that you try and tell them something about modern IT and they just blow it off because they think they know everything. That's the other thing. Are they willing to listen to the people who do have that experience? And like the things I've presented in this video, if you were to pose those questions to them about how important those things are, do they understand the importance of them? Can they explain the importance of it in detail? If they can't, these are IT fundamentals. If they can't explain them, they may not be the best choice to run your IT shop. Another problem that I'm sure has led to a lot of the catastrophic ransomware attacks that shut down entire companies was probably because of incompetent lowest bidder IT consultants. You really get what you pay for. And if you have an IT consulting firm that promises to offer you the same services as any other consulting firm, but like way less of a cost, like 25% less, why do you suppose they can do that? Is it because they're generous, they're super efficient, they're not as greedy? No. It's because the typical business model of the lowest bidder IT consultant is this. You sign up as many customers as you possibly can. You greatly overcommit yourself to more work than you can ever honestly handle. And then you give each customer the quickest, the laziest, most incompetent service you can get away with without anybody noticing how bad it is. And then if and when something really bad happens, well, all that the business owner can do is fire them and get another contractor. See, by that point, they've already gotten your money for months or years, and you can't sue them because of some fine print that they slipped into the contract that absolves them of all responsibility. And so expensive is cheap, cheap is expensive. If you spend a little bit more money and get a more reputable firm up front, then you'll have a lot less regrets later on when something bad doesn't happen. So how do you get a good IT contractor? Well, you have to look at a lot more than just the cost. You have to look at the consulting firm as a whole and figure out if they really are going to be able to deliver the service that they are promising. So how long have they been in business? If they are a startup, they've only been in business for 6 months and they haven't really gotten a good track record just yet to demonstrate that they really can do the job, then you might want to go with somebody else that has a longer track record. Who are their other clients? Is there someone at one of the other clients who would be willing to give them a positive recommendation upon request? What kind of things would they have to say about them? Also, how big is the consulting staff? If they only have 5 people and they're spreading them amongst, 12, 15, 20 different customers, you may not get the level of service from those people that really have been promised. And also, what is the staff's specific experience and qualifications? Will they let you see their staff's resume? Also, how many customers are they covering with that staff? Once again, if they have a very large customer base and only a few people, that's the scenario we're talking about with the lowest bidder IT contractor, where they may not really be able to cover all of those people and really give everybody what they've promised. And that really goes into what guarantees of service or SLAs are they willing to commit to in writing? What are their specific consequences if they fail to meet those SLAs? Is there a point in writing where it automatically kicks in that they have failed to offer the service that they promised, and so you get your money back? What are the specific teeth and consequences that are written into that contract? Because the more vague it is, the less recourse you're going to have when something goes sideways. And just a kind of a political side note here, the people running the consulting firm, are they friends, family, business partners of somebody you work with or that works for you? Somebody that their opinion of the matter may not be 100% objective because they have some sort of skin in the game. It's their cousin Eddie that, he's starting up a consulting firm. He doesn't have a lot of customers yet, and they're trying to help Eddie out. Well,
What if Eddie is not good at his job? You don't want to find that out the hard way. And I've seen situations where that was the case, where they got into contracts with consulting firms that really weren't that great. The only reason they did it is because it was Cousin Eddie. So you really don't want to have that happen to you. Be careful about who makes the recommendation and what their motive for making that recommendation might be.
Something I really need you to take away from this, though, is that if you're not taking IT security seriously, you really need to now. IT security is not some separate area of discipline away from the rest of IT. There's not some priesthood of IT security people that handle all of that. It is just how we do IT. We have to get into the mindset of if we're not doing it securely, we're not doing it right. So like hospitals that focus on cleanliness and sanitation in every part of how they do medicine, IT security should just be part of everything we do in IT. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you made it this far, congratulations. I hope I didn't bore you to death. I'm not going to try and shamelessly plug my YouTube channel, begging you to like it and subscribe and share it and all that stuff. I have like 10 videos. I used to have a lot more on topics that I really wasn't qualified to speak about. So I'm deciding to go a different direction and speak about something that, well, I actually do know something about with real life experience and not just a bunch of documentaries I watched on Netflix. So if you're a security professional, you have additional wisdom you'd like to share, go ahead, comment. If you're a troll looking to stir the pot because you really have nothing more constructive to do with your life, I pity you. That's really sad. Go find something more constructive to do. And if you're a criminal that's mad because I'm messing up your thing here, really, how sustainable was this whole thing really going to be? With doing ransomware, eventually you got to find a different thing anyway. So really, you should already be a step ahead of people like me. You should already be thinking about what your next big scheme is going to be. If you're not thinking ahead, you're not a good criminal. So there you go. All right. Thanks for watching. Take care.